4 brand new topics selected by you. A whole new conversation. Welcome back to 360 Speedway. Hello, I'm Derek Smith. Welcome back to 360 Speedway HQ. Thank you once again for tuning in and supporting what we do. We're 5 weeks in already, episode 5. We've already built up quite a bit of a library of discussion topics available to watch back. Pour yourself a glass of something cool and soothing, sit back on a Friday or a Saturday night and pick over and listen back to all of the discussion subjects that you have voted for and that we have built into our discussion. A lot of topics, we've covered a lot of ground already. Episode 5 and another 4 fresh topics to discuss this week. Okay, a new week, a whole new conversation, some by now familiar faces to pick over those discussion topics, and one brand new face, although a very familiar face to Speedway fans all over the country. So without further ado, let's introduce our first guest, a bit of a regular, and a man who has attracted lots of comments on YouTube and Facebook. You're almost going viral, Stuart, with some of your comments and some of your analysis. Welcome back, Big Mac. Stewart McDonald, you had a good week?
Had a good week, thanks, Derek. Yes, it's been very nice weather and we're looking forward to tonight. So excellent.
Next up, another familiar face, and in fact an ever-present. 5 weeks into 360 Speedway, this man has never missed a beat. Of course, I'm talking about man of many clubs, Stuart Robson. Welcome back, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Evening, everybody.
And for the first time on 360 Speedway, a new face, albeit a very familiar one to Speedway fans across the land, far and near. A big warm welcome to Mr. Nigel Crabtree. Good evening.
Hey up, Derek. Thanks very much for having us.
You're welcome. A up.
Hey up.
As long as you can understand me and I can understand you, Nigel, we'll be fine.
I'll be on my best behaviour, you understand.
Listen, I used to watch Emmerdale back in the day. I'll be fine, Nigel, don't you worry. You're looking well, Nigel. You're obviously enjoying the spring / summer sunshine.
Can't beat it, can you? Can't beat it.
Absolutely not. Collectively, 360 Speedway viewers, tonight's handlebar heroes. Okay, thank you very much for voting on our discussion topics this week. Typically posted on Facebook on a Sunday night. 6 topics were offered. You voted for your top 4, and those are the ones that we're going to get amongst this evening. Once again, usual disclaimer, any views and opinions expressed by any of the 4 of us are our own views and opinions, and not necessarily those of any clubs, former clubs, or Speedway associations. It's a slightly different disclaimer I use every week, but you get the gist. Okay, anyway, I hope you're enjoying the range of topics that we've covered so far. And let's move on, guys, and get into Fan Pulse Lap 1 tonight. I'll put the graphic on screen in just a second. And first of all, we're going to kick off with a discussion on unsung heroes of Speedway. So another potentially wide subject. Where do you start? Who do you consider to be a sung hero and an unsung hero? But typically, I think, when supporters talk about heroes in Speedway, we tend to think about, don't we, the riders who entertain and do their stuff on track, and maybe the odd club promoter or club owner who has gone out of their way to make sure that clubs prevail through thick and thin. But I wondered if we could look a little bit beyond that, and I won't lead you in terms of some of my thoughts, but Nigel, I'm going to ask you to step in. First of all, unsung heroes in the world of Speedway. Who springs to mind?
Well, yeah, as you said, Eric, the heroes are the riders, but the unsung heroes, the ones behind the scenes, aren't they? I can remember in my day at Stoke, on a Friday night, there was maybe a gang of 10 people, come rain, sunshine, whatever, and they were putting the sheets on the dog track, putting the fence up, without those type of people, and then people are at every track, I'm pretty sure of that, all volunteers. Without those people, there would be no speedway, I'm sure. Same as without no riders, there'd be no speedway. So they're just as important. The ones behind the scenes that you never see, you never hear of. Without them, there wouldn't be any.
You're so right, Nigel. And, sometimes I think, or some supporters might think that, or allow themselves to think even, that modern day speedway is a little bit more sophisticated than it was back in the day. But even today, speedway clubs up and down the length of the UK and beyond absolutely depend on volunteers and people who, to your point, Nigel, they would be anonymous. You wouldn't recognise them necessarily on the terraces, but without them, the clubs just simply couldn't come to tapes each week.
For sure. I mean, I'm sure there isn't a club in the country what isn't reliant on volunteers. I'm sure there isn't. I'd say I might have got that wrong a bit. I don't know. But certainly 95% of them will, only be running because of the volunteers.
No, I think you're completely right. Stuart Robson, unsung heroes, beyond what Nigel's mentioned, what sort of roles, what sort of people spring to mind?
Well, to be honest, the people that sprung to mind is what Nigel just said. The people that turn up at the tracks week in, week out, and do the volunteer work, and do it for free, track staff. And, they do it for free. Without them, it just wouldn't happen. And the obvious is the fans as well. If without the fans turning up, again, there wouldn't be a sport. That's another thing you've got to think about that. The people turn up in, week out on school night on a lot of clubs, and they're up for work at sort of 6, 7 o'clock the next morning. Kids are there and they've got to go to school the next day. All that stuff. So fans as well as the volunteers and track staff.
I'm glad you mentioned track staff, Stuart, and sometimes those guys do come to attention because the track has been particularly good or perhaps has been criticised, and people do forget sometimes that a lot of the hard graft during the week, late into the night, early in the morning, sometimes around speedway fixtures is performed by volunteers, and as you say, Stuart, they've got a life outside of speedway, right?
Absolutely, they do. I mean, I did a bit of work when I was riding with Rye House. I did a bit of work down there on the stadium, in the changing rooms and stuff. And there was people turning up every day to help just do general daily tasks within the stadium, help with the fence, repair the fence, clean the pits, sweeping the pits. That's something. The pits get so dirty and someone has to come and clean them, and that's just a volunteer that turns up and cleans them. And the same in the stands, and emptying the bins, and cleaning out the bar, and all sorts, everything. There's so many jobs, cleaning toilets, everything, things like that. It's all done by volunteers.
Stuart McDonald, is it fair to say that when you're riding, you turn up, you're the star of the show? Yes, you put in some graft behind the scenes. Yes, you take the risks. We get all that, but the riders are the superstars of the speedway circuit, right? But you turn up, to Stuart's point, with a nice clean pit bay, the stadium's pristine, everything's shiny and ready to go again, and your job is in many ways is made easy by all of these the small army of volunteers around the club.
Absolutely, like Crabby and Robbo says, without these volunteers, Speedway wouldn't be such a success. We need these sort of people to help us. And I remember, prior to racing, I used to go down to Glasgow. It was Blantyre and then Sheffield, in between me and Workington. But I used to help. My father would help. And I think without, these sort of people, the passion for the sport that they have, to give up their day, to pay for fuel money, lunches himself, I think it's phenomenal. I say the sport, over the last 30, 40 years, in my experience, without these people, wouldn't have been as much of a success. But, you talk about unsung heroes. I don't know, obviously the fans in the background, but I think Nigel and Rob will agree that you look at some of the promoters over the years, Nigel, you've got Dave Tatton, you've got the Dugards, you've got the Beatons, and you look at Chris Van Straten, there was Slen Silver, all these guys, these people that supported the Speedway and kept it running for so many years, attracted people every week just to help them. You know, the time, the effort and the money, you know, that they put into it. We used to go and do our bikes at the Beatons fans, so the Beatons garages, and all the fans would come down to offer help because they knew the Beatons family, you know, and it was such a family sport and still is. And without these sort of people, the sport wouldn't be where it is.
Nigel, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. I think you actually said that, you know, every club in the land has to a lesser or greater extent, you know, relied on and still do rely on volunteer labour. You know, we touched on some of the roles, literally from cleaners to people who sell things, to people who man the turnstiles, to people who work the food stalls or the merchandise stalls. What about, Nigel, and sorry, I shouldn't forget the medics and first aid staff. You know, they obviously have a key role to play, and many times have proved to be heroes in terms of some of the first aid that they've had to apply trackside. I was thinking, Nigel, from a rider's point of view, would it be reasonable to suggest or include sponsors within the unsung hero category?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my time, I had one or two sponsors, never even wanted to mention. You know, they just wanted to help. They became friends, as I'm sure Robbo and Stuart, you know, they had the same people. They weren't particularly, well, I suppose they were sponsors, but they were friends helping you. That's what it was, really. Which we were all very appreciative of all that, you know, because it was hard going. I don't know, the money I don't know. It's very hard. Compared to our day to now, I think it's chalk and cheese, really. But you couldn't manage without any of them people. They were all part of the package, you know, from top to bottom. Anybody that had anything to do with it, it was all part of the package. And without some of them people, it wouldn't be about, you know, top to bottom, you know, from the promoter right to the very bottom, whoever that be. Every job was important. Like Robbo said, sweeping the pits out, it's as important a job as the man putting the meeting on, because it's just another job that has to be done.
Yeah. And thinking about it, Robbo, you know, some of the roles, you know, you think of any Speedway club anywhere, and some of the unsung heroes that we've been talking about are invisible, right? You know, some supporters might overlook the fact that people have to clean the pits and empty the bins and do all that good stuff. You know, edit the programme. You know, I've done that in the past at Glasgow, and it's quite time consuming and quite a responsibility to piece together a programme to a deadline on a weekly basis, and sometimes at very short notice. But there are some roles, of course, which are a bit more obvious, right? There are some roles around Speedway where, to be fair, the individuals involved have had to put their head above the parapet, right? So I'm thinking about track officials, clerk of the course, referees, centigrade announcers, people of that ilk, right? And, you know, I'm not going to say that. Well, I'm not going to necessarily say they're all heroes, but without them, we couldn't operate Speedway.
Exactly. Like Nigel just said there, everybody plays a part, and without that little part, you know, it's every it's like a cog, you know, like a cog. Without one cog, the others wouldn't turn. So everybody plays a part in it. It might only seem like a small part, but that small part is all part of the big picture at the end of it all. You know, like you said, the guys who grade the track, the flagman, the guys who pull the tapes down, the referee, timekeeper, announcer, you know, you name it. The list goes on. There's so many, you know, paramedics, first aid staff in general. The list goes on. You know, there's a big list of and it needs everybody to play their part.
But Big Mac, I think, you know, even for supporters who have been following Speedway forever, and there's a lot of us, thankfully, who fall into that category, would be or might be quite surprised by the range of people who do. It might just be a little job, a 5-minute job on a weekly basis, or it might be a bit more involved. But in combination to Robbo's point, it's many cogs that make the whole machine tick over. But one cohort of unsung heroes that I would like to call out, and I'd like your views on it, is how about the supporters themselves? Because there are, without supporters there would be no sport, quite obviously, but there's many supporters who have been over the course and remain as passionate about the sport of speedway now as they did many decades ago.
You're spot on, Derek. I think one person that we all probably see on Facebook quite regularly is John Houston. John's a Glasgow Tigers fan, and hats off to John for what he does on Facebook for Scottish Speedway. He puts his days on, he encourages ex-riders to go, and it's such dedication for someone to put so much into the sport. I went to one of his days, and it was great. I seen all the old riders there, and fans were coming along, and I was signing autographs after 20 years, and you think, wow, people talking to me, and you've not changed, I've got grey hairs, better looking, but it's always sort of people that keep the sport out there, and I think without them, it would be a travesty, the effort that they put in to keeping it alive. And also, with Facebook, I think we'll all agree, we end up with more friends on Facebook from Speedway from 20, 30 years ago than we do now.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I would look a whole lonelier person without my Speedway Facebook friends. That's for sure. Listen, so I think we've picked out, hopefully, 360 Speedsters. We've hopefully picked out a good selection of unsung heroes. There may be some roles out there, some people that we haven't thought of that you have. So please make yourself known, share your views, share your opinions with us. Tell us who we missed out. Hopefully those unsung heroes who are out there, collectively, continue to be exactly that and support the sport that we all love. Again, thank you very much to those 360 Speedsters, 360 followers who have taken some time out to send us in some messages. We still haven't had that elusive voice note message via WhatsApp. I don't know what I've got to do to persuade someone, to tempt someone. Maybe I need to incentivise someone financially. I know that someone will do it. Next week, we'll have some voice notes. Anyway, to some messages today. So, a local message to me, at least to Speedway, to 360 Speedway HQ. James C., a fellow Glaswegian, that writes, with Leon going great guns and Dan consistently on the gas, Tiger's top end looks better than most. Freddie Hodder was so much more composed against Edinburgh, and in brackets, intentional spelling. Yeah, yes, that's not a typo. Our dearest rivals in the east of Scotland are often referred to in that way. So yes, to your point, James. Yep, Glasgow defeated Edinburgh eventually in the final BSN Scottish section qualifier at Ashfield last Friday night. The Tigers had already secured safe passage to the semi-final. The Monarchs had to win. They came to Ashfield on the back of a win there 3 weeks previously. And it looked pretty tight. With only 2 heats to go, there was only 2 points in it. But on those final 2 heats, the Glasgow side managed to bang in 2 5-1s to get over the line and make us Glasgow fans wonder what we were concerned about. But to your point, James, yeah, Leon Flint, the best I've ever seen him riding really confidently and really composed in his riding. He scored a paid maximum from 5 rides. Dan Thompson had some mechanical problems. I think he blew his number 1 engine on Friday night, and he struggled to 5 points only. But Dan has been a constant at the top of the score charts for the Tigers so far this season. And man of the night probably was Freddie Hodder, who had a little bit of behind closed doors practice the day before at Ashfield, and that showed in Freddie's performance. So keep up the good work, Freddie Hodder. Thanks for writing in, James. Next up this week, Jacqueline A. from Humberside. Jacqueline writes, an outstanding British final on Monday night, wasn't it just? The race action was as good as anywhere in Poland. Congrats to the finalists and to Robert Lambert, of course, for winning the heat of the century. Well, that's an apt way to describe it, Jacqueline, because the finale, Heat 22, as it was on Monday night, was absolutely sensational. I will never tire of watching it back, and we're going to feature it in this episode. So keep across all 4 segments of episode 5. We're going to play back that final and enjoy it again. 2 minutes of sheer entertainment. And credit to Bellevue and the track staff at the National Speedway Stadium, Andy Meredith and his team, because that was some stage for the riders to do their stuff on Monday night. Darren from Yarmouth writes, Emil is such a miss in the Grand Prix. Absolutely. Surely the organisers cannot overlook him in 2026, or even give him a wild card in one of this year's series. Him and Doyley, witches 1 and 2 all the way. I wouldn't bet against that at some point if Emil was elevated into this year's series. Certainly he's one of the riders, isn't he? He's one of the riders on the world stage who everyone knows and recognises could compete against the Grand Prix rider field. He would give Bartosz a run for his money, I'm quite sure. And I think I have read some indication that Emil will be reconsidered by the FAM next season. So fingers crossed that happens. And you're a lucky man, Darren, to get to see Emil and Doyley in the same team at the same time, week on week around Vauxhall. Thanks for taking time, Darren. And finally for now, Graham S. from Workington in sunny Cumbria. So we've discovered that the Comets are not as good as we thought. Struggling to win at home and hopeless away. Is Batch the answer? Well, there's a lot to be unpacked in that comment, Graham. Obviously some disappointment. Workington were annihilated, let's be honest, 61-29 at Scunthorpe last week. The Scorpions had pushed the Comets at home as well. The Comets haven't settled just as quickly as I think a lot of championship supporters expected. The season is early. The league campaign is yet to get underway, of course. And the reference there to Batch, Troy Batchelor came in for some criticism for his performances last weekend. And I wasn't there, didn't see it firsthand, read all of the accounts secondhand. And I'm quite prepared to... Troy Batchelor is a quality rider. And I'm quite sure he will silence his critics in the appropriate way on track. But Graham, hang in there, keep the faith with the Comets, and I hope you enjoy our spotlight on the Comets in one of the segments of episode 5. Thanks for writing in.